My father introduced me to his fiancée at a barbecue in June. I recognized her ring before I recognized her face. A sapphire, old cut, set high in a worn gold band. I'd seen that exact ring 5 years earlier, on a different woman's hand, at a different family's dinner table, right before that family lost everything they had left of the mother they'd already buried. I didn't say anything that day. I just watched her laugh at my father's joke and thought, I know this playbook. I've watched it played before. My name is Joe. My mother, Diane, died 2 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 11 brutal months, and then a house that got quiet in a way houses aren't supposed to get. My father, Frank, is 64, and for a year and a half after she died, he barely left the garage. He fixed things that didn't need fixing. He learned to cook badly and ate alone. Then this spring, he started smiling on the phone. Her name was Carol. He met her at a grief support group, met cute if grief can have one, and within 6 weeks he was different. Lighter. He laughed again, actually laughed, and my first feeling, if I'm being accurate about it, wasn't suspicion. It was relief so large it embarrassed me. The suspicion came later. It came with the ring. I should tell you something about myself, because it explains everything that comes after. When my mother got sick, I could not fix anything about what was happening to her. I could not slow it down, I could not undiagnose it, I could not do one single useful thing with my hands. So I did the only thing that made the fear feel smaller. I researched. Every treatment, every specialist, every study, every statistic, at 2 in the morning for 11 straight months. It didn't save her. But it taught me something about myself. I am, underneath everything else, a person who copes with helplessness by finding out everything there is to know. So here's the story I was already carrying around, 5 years before I ever met Carol. My college roommate, Amara, had a father named Ray. Widower, 60-something, a good man who'd loved his wife for 30 years and didn't know how to be alone. A year after Amara's mother died, a woman came into Ray's life, warm, attentive, recently widowed herself, asking for nothing. Her name, then, was Denise. I met Denise exactly once, at a family dinner during my senior year, because Amara wanted a friend there for backup. I remember 3 things about that night. Denise's story about losing her own husband to the same terrible thing as Amara's mother, which turned out later to shift depending on who was listening. Denise gently steering every conversation away from Ray's siblings, who kept asking questions she didn't like. And that ring. A sapphire, old cut, high setting, worn gold. 6 weeks after that dinner, Ray loaned Denise $40,000 for a medical emergency involving a sister who, as far as anyone could ever determine, did not exist. 2 weeks after that, 3 days before the wedding, Denise disappeared. New phone number. New city, presumably. Ray never got the money back. He also never fully recovered, not the money, not the trust, not the year he lost trying to understand what had happened to him. I hadn't thought about Denise in years. Then I shook a stranger's hand at my father's barbecue and felt a ring I already knew. I told myself it was a coincidence. Rings get sold, resold, passed through estate sales. I've always been the kind of person who believes documents over instinct, and a ring alone is not a document. But then I started noticing everything else, and coincidence stopped being the simplest explanation. Carol had a tragic story about a late husband that changed slightly each time she told it. A car accident, once. A heart condition, another time. She was warm toward me and my uncle, but she was also, quietly and expertly, discouraging whenever either of us tried to spend real time alone with her, redirecting every deeper question with a laugh and a change of subject. Carol was engaged to my father within 10 weeks of that barbecue, a ring on her hand, a date on the calendar, a whirlwind everyone else called romantic. I called Amara for the first time in 3 years and asked her one question. What did Denise look like? Amara didn't need to think about it. She described a woman I had just eaten barbecue with. I want to describe what happened when I raised this with my family, because it matters for what I did next. I sat my father down carefully and told him what I remembered, what Amara remembered, what the ring looked like in an old photo, I still had buried in a cloud backup from 10 years ago. I laid the two photos side by side on his kitchen table, Denise at that long-ago dinner, Carol at our barbecue, 5 years and one different hair color apart, one unmistakable sapphire ring in both. My father looked at the photos for a long moment. Then he looked at me with an expression I will carry for the rest of my life, not anger exactly, but something adjacent to it, protective of the wrong person. "You haven't seen me happy since your mother died," he said. "Not once in almost 2 years. Now I finally am, and your first instinct is to try to take it apart. I understand where it's coming from, Joe. I do. But this isn't fair to Carol." My uncle used almost the same words a week later, over the phone, gentler but landing the same way. "Jealous, not ready, can't watch him move on." I had a matching photograph and a matching ring, and the entire family's verdict was that grief had made me unkind. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I had to sit with it for months. I didn't argue. Arguing with a family that's already decided your evidence is your pain talking doesn't work. I'd learned that from watching what happened to Ray's siblings, who tried exactly that and gotten exactly nowhere until it was already too late. So I went back to the only thing that has ever made fear feel smaller to me. I stopped trying to convince anyone with a feeling. I started building a record instead. Marriage license applications are public record, filed at the county clerk's office, searchable, permanent, whether or not the wedding ever happens. I didn't know that until I needed to. I spent 3 weekends teaching myself how each county's record system worked, one clunky government website at a time, and I found, in the process, an entire quiet corner of the internet full of people who'd had to learn the exact same thing for the exact same reason. Grown children, mostly. None of us had wanted this particular education. All of us had it now. I started with Denise Marsh, the name Ray had known her by. One marriage license application, filed, never finalized, 5 years ago in Ray's County. I widened the search by physical description and by the specific, distinctive pattern application filed, then withdrawn or simply never followed through, and I found 2 more. A different name in Ohio, 3 years ago, application filed and abandoned 6 days before the scheduled date. A different name again in Arizona, 18 months ago, same pattern, this one preceded by a documented loan that showed up, oddly enough, in a small claims filing from a very frustrated adult son. 3 states, 3 names, 3 engagements. 0 completed marriages. Every single one preceded by a large sum of money changing hands, and every single one ending in the same act. Vanishing in the final week, right before the vows, right after the money had time to clear. I called the man from the small claims filing in Arizona. His name was Warren. He was 71, and it took him 4 sentences to describe a woman I'd been carrying around in the back of my mind for 5 years, under an entirely different name, in an entirely different state. I had by then 4 separate paper trails all leading to the same unfinished marriage, over and over, like a woman who does everything but the wedding every single time on purpose. Here is what made this urgent, and not just sad. 2 weeks before the wedding, Carol asked my father to add her to his checking account for convenience, and to look into refinancing the house, nothing dramatic, framed as practical, the kind of thing engaged couples do. Frank, who trusted her completely and had no reason not to, had an appointment scheduled with his bank to start the paperwork. I understood the shape of the pattern now well enough to know what came after that appointment, historically. The money moved, then she vanished. I did not have time for my family to slowly come around to believing photographs. I had maybe 10 days. The engagement party was already scheduled. A backyard gathering, family and close friends, the kind of thing my father would never have agreed to cancel without a very good reason. And my daughter has a feeling had already been tested and had already failed. So I brought a different kind of proof to the party. I asked Amara to come with me as my +1, and I didn't tell my father why, because I needed one thing that afternoon that no photograph could give me. A person who had actually watched this happen once already, standing in the same room as the woman doing it again. Carol saw Amara arrive at my side, across the yard, before I'd said a single word. I watched her face. I want to describe it precisely, because I have never seen anything like it before or since. The practiced warmth didn't crumble so much as it simply stopped being maintained, all at once, like a hand finally letting go of something heavy it had been holding for a very long time. She knew exactly who Amara was. She knew in that instant that the ring, the story, the whole architecture of it had just met someone who could identify every piece. I didn't need to give a speech. I walked over to my father in front of maybe 30 guests and I put a folder in his hands. 4 marriage license filings, 4 names, 4 withdrawn applications, each one after money moved, each one days before a wedding that never came. Photographs, dated, matched, undeniable. Ask her real name, I said. Just once. Out loud in front of everyone here right now, ask her the name on this first application. My father did not ask her that question in the end. He didn't need to. He looked at the folder, and then at Carol, and then at Amara standing 3 feet away. A stranger to him an hour earlier, now unmistakably a witness. And something in his face closed like a door he'd been holding open by force for months. Carol made one last attempt at the warmth, the same practiced tone that had worked on all of us for months. Frank, honey, whatever this is, we can talk about it, just the 2 of us. You tried that same line on Joe's family, Amara said, quiet and completely steady, nodding at Joe. It worked for a while. It's not going to work today. Carol left the party alone, on foot, having arrived in my father's car. Nobody stopped her. Nobody needed to. The bank appointment was canceled that same afternoon, which mattered more than anything I've described so far, because it meant the checking account. The refinance, the money, every dollar of it, stayed exactly where it was. I called Warren in Arizona and the man from the Ohio filing, whose name turned out to be Gerald, and I connected all of them with Ray's family, who had spent 5 years wanting exactly this and never having the pieces to build it. Between the 4 households, there was more than enough for a fraud case that finally had geography, dates, and a documented pattern instead of 4 separate, isolated humiliations that each looked, on their own, like an unlucky romance. An investigator picked it up within the month. I won't pretend it moves fast, these cases rarely do, and I've stopped expecting the money any of them lost to fully come back. But there is an open case now, with a real name attached to it, instead of 4 grieving men, each quietly believing they were the only fool who'd ever fallen for it. My father did not speak to me for 11 days after the party. That part matters too, because it would be easy to end this story at the folder and skip the part where being right cost me something. On the 12th day, he called and asked if I still had the number for that man in Arizona. He wanted to hear it from someone who wasn't his daughter, not because he didn't believe me anymore, but because some things a person has to hear from a stranger before they can actually let themselves feel them. He talked to Warren for over an hour. He called me the next morning and said 4 words, "I should have listened." I told him he listened exactly when it counted, which was true, even if it took him longer than I would have liked. Amara and I talk every week now. We built something out of the worst 5 years of both our fathers' lives, and it turns out that's a stronger foundation for a friendship than a shared dorm room ever was. My father is dating again, cautiously, months later, a woman from his old bowling league he's known for a decade, whose whole history is a matter of public record because half the neighborhood has known her since 1994. I checked anyway. Some habits don't turn off just because the danger's passed. People assume the hardest part of this story was catching her. It wasn't. Denise Carol, whatever her real name turns out to be when the case finally closes, she was never the hard part. She was, in the end, just a pattern. And once grief teaches you to go looking for facts at 2 in the morning, you never really stop. You just find new things worth staying up for. The hard part was being right, and watching the people who loved me decide that being right made me the problem. The hard part was holding a folder full of documented, dated, undeniable proof, and still needing to wait for a stranger's voice to make my own father believe it. I don't know what to do with that yet, except to say it plainly. Sometimes the person trying to protect you is not the one being unreasonable. Sometimes she's just the only one who's seen this exact story before and is trying to keep you from becoming its next chapter. Thanks for listening. If you've ever watched someone you love walk towards something you could already see coming, tell me about it in the comments. I read everyone. And if a ring, a name, a story ever feels like something you've seen before, trust that feeling long enough to check. The record is usually already there. Somebody just has to go looking for it.